Thom Hartmann here on the news. You need to know this. Mitt Romney, the richest man to ever run for president on a major party ticket, cleaned up last night in the Illinois primary, beating Rick Santorum 47 to 35%. And as could be expected, Romney's huge cash advantage helped him win Illinois. He outspent Santorum 7-1 in the state to pick up at least 41 new delegates to add to his growing lead. Still, if Romney hopes to reach the magic number of 1,144 delegates to secure the nomination before the Republican convention, he'll have to collect just less than half of all the remaining delegates. That's a feat that could be difficult if Newt Gingrich, who placed an abysmal fourth in the Illinois primary, drops out and hands his supporters to Santorum. Then again, if multimillionaire Karl Rove's super PAC, American Crossroads, which currently has $23.5 million in cash on hand, decides to pick Romney as its guy, then Mitt's campaign might easily buy the Republican nomination without even getting out of breath. American women are screwed. Putting aside the Republicans' war on women for a moment, a new report from the National Women's Law Center reveals that health insurance companies are charging women in America an extra $1 billion annually, and it's just good old-fashioned gender discrimination. The report finds that the practice of for-profit health insurers charging women more than men for identical coverage is widespread, and states are doing little to stop the ripoff. In the states that don't ban health insurance discrimination based on gender, 92% of the best-selling plans charge women more than men. President Obama's Affordable Care Act would ban this practice nationally, saving women $1 billion a year. Unfortunately for women, Republicans are working as hard as they can to repeal Obamacare. In the rest of the news, the backlash against Paul Ryan's radical budget plan continues. A number of faith leaders have come forward to blast Ryan's extremist vision for America, which takes health insurance away from 48 million Americans to pay for a $3 trillion tax cut for the richest 1%. Bishop Gene Robinson said about the budget plan, "The Ryan budget robs the poor, the marginalized, and the vulnerable of the safety net so integral to their survival. By any measure of civility and regard for one's neighbor, it's an immoral disaster." Ryan's plan also hands Medicare to for-profit health insurance CEOs and makes massive cuts in Social Security, setting the stage to hand Social Security's $2.6 trillion trust fund over to Wall Street. No wonder Wall Street billionaires have reportedly been seen wearing Paul Ryan for VP pins. The Department of Justice says Florida is discriminating against minority voters. Last year, Florida passed a new law that clamps down on people helping others to register to vote and also cuts back on early voting. But the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department is now filing a challenge to the new law in court, claiming that Florida failed to prove that these election law changes will not, quote, deny or abridge the right to vote on the basis of race, color, or membership in a language minority group. States with a history of racial discrimination, like Florida, must have any changes to their election laws approved by the Justice Department. Time in the courts will tell if Governor Rick Scott's plan to keep minority voters away from the polls works this year. Who's going to foot the bill for climate change? According to a new study out of the Stockholm Environment Institute, increasing greenhouse gases will cost over $2 trillion a year in damage to our planet's oceans by the end of the century. With warmer oceans comes greater acidification, which wipes out fisheries and coral reefs. Plus, rising sea levels and stronger storms do costly damage to coastlines. Nonetheless, we're giving tens of billions of dollars in taxpayer subsidies to transnational oil corporations to accelerate climate change rather than making them pay for the damage they're causing. This is not only irresponsible, it's outright dangerous. It means that future generations of Americans will have to cope with a much harsher planet. Speaking of climate change, the war on science heads to Tennessee. This week, the Tennessee state legislature passed a bill requiring public schools to teach that there's a controversy over evolution and global warming. As the law says, the teaching of biological evolution, the chemical origins of life, global warming, and human cloning can cause controversy. Thus, school systems must present the science curriculum as it addresses scientific controversies, end quote. Critics are blasting the legislation, calling it a monkey bill that will lead to creationism being taught in classrooms. Something tells me the big oil lobby is behind this one, too, hoping that a new generation of Americans denying global warming will keep their fossil fuel profits flowing for another generation. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, while leaders in Israel and Iran beat the drum to war, and people living in those nations are calling for peace, recognizing that they're the ones who will suffer the most from a war, individual citizens in Iran and Israel are taking to Facebook to reach out to each other in hopes of finding solidarity and mutual respect. The campaign started when an Israeli couple created the Facebook group Israelis heart Iran. Then a group of Iranians responded with their own Iranians Love Israel. The two groups have garnered thousands of followers and responses since going online. And finally, Ron Paul, the only candidate in the Republican race for president who has not won a state, is coming out against Secret Service protection. All major candidates for president are entitled to Secret Service protection within 120 days of a general election, but Paul is calling that a, quote, form of welfare. That's no surprise, since Ron Paul also thinks federal aid to college students, health insurance assistance to poor people, free public roads, and cops and firefighters are welfare too. But Ron Paul shouldn't worry too much, considering he's only running for president to get his son Rand a job in Romney's cabinet. Ron Paul probably won't be considered a major candidate anyway. And that's the way it is today, Wednesday, March 21st, 2012. I'm Thom Hartmann.